Hello, everyone. I am Carmen DeBono, and this is Il-MALTIN TAGHNA, presented by the Maltese Center of New York. Today, we have a special guest, filmmaker Alex Camilleri, whose film LUZZU was the first Maltese film to screen at the Sundance Film Festival this year, receiving high praise as in now being released across Europe, Japan, and the U.S. 14,000 films were submitted at the 2021 Sundance Film Festival, and LUZZU was an official selection of the World Cinema Dramatic Competition. It is a beautifully raw drama of a Maltese fisherman's struggle to make an income. Myself being Maltese American and having seen so many films with Malta in the background, I always wanted to see a Maltese film. And then hearing about LUZZU being shown at Sundance Film Festival, I was so excited. And even more now that it's being released at the Quad Cinema in New York City this week. Just like anyone from a particular culture or nationality, seeing something in a film that you can identify with makes it all the more special, be it the location, dialogue, story, or the people. And LUZZU has all those elements. So how did a Maltese American born and raised in the Midwest come to direct, write, and edit a film set in Malta about a young fisherman? We will find out today on our interview with Alex Camilleri on Il-MALTIN TAGHNA.
I shared the feeling of growing up and seeing films that had been shot in Malta, but Malta was never playing itself. And at the same time, I feel like my time going back and forth between the Midwest and Malta just fed my imagination in a really fruitful way. The contrast between these worlds, I think, always made me hunger for Malta and made my imagination much larger while I would be visiting family. And so stories were always just kind of filtering in. Anywhere I looked could it always seemed like a film was ready to unfold in front of you. And I think Malta has that. That's just the collision of so many energies and the faces and the locations. My God, it's really, if you put a camera down, you'll have a film.
Right.
So that was all kind of seeded in me from a pretty young age. And then as I, started becoming interested in movies more seriously and studied a bit in university, I became aware of what we could call national cinemas, kind of categorizing a filmmaking output and kind of identifying something about the place arises through the films themselves. And I would be so educated and so inspired about different parts of the world just by watching the films that came from there. And I always expected at some point there would be these Maltese films that I could watch and have a similar kind of awe and respect for the filmmaking, enunciating parts of the culture itself. And that kind of filmmaking never quite happened. And it kind of put the fire under me to really set down and combine my love of films with my love of Malta. And that in some sense, LUZZU is sort of a lifetime in the making, all those kind of forces adding up. And then kind of by age 30, I set about doing it.
Yeah, so tell me about choosing the subject matter, LUZZU. I mean, LUZZU is whoever's Maltese pretty much knows LUZZU is an identifier for Malta. I believe even at one time when they were designing the emblem for Malta after independence, the LUZZU was on it, and then it was changed again in somewhere in the 80s. What drew you to choose a fisherman as your story? Being in the Midwest, I'm sure you were not exposed, to the sea and fishing and things like that. What drew you to choose that?
Yeah, well, so my parents immigrated from Malta, so they are sea people. I grew up pretty well landlocked, so I'd actually never gone fishing in my life before making this film, and I get seasick pretty easily. But the context of a film is important in one sense, but it is just the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, you have to find something deeper. And I was responding to when well, when I set out just to kind of to decide on what the context was going to be, I mean, the fishermen in Malta, they're around us. We see them everywhere. We see the LUZZUs. You know, in one sense, they're a cliche because the image is so it saturates us so much as it sort of is an identifier for the island. Um, it seemed like it's an image somehow that's lost some meaning with time. Um, and I wanted to get past the surface and explore really what is this job about. So little seemed to be known about traditional fishermen in Malta. And immediately when I started doing some research and talking to fishermen, I saw that, okay, yes, the context is so interesting. It's so beautiful and steeped in tradition, but there's so much going on in the family life of the fishermen. And that was something that I could latch onto on a personal level. Because at this moment in time, many fishermen are making decisions about whether they can indeed pass on this family trade to the next generation. And it surprised me to hear many fishermen say that they didn't want to. They were very clear-eyed about the difficulties that would face their next generation, from the changing climate to the increasingly bureaucratic nature of the work and the competition from industrial fishing. That some of these guys were doing everything that they could to get their own children out of this tradition, which had defined their families.
Wow.
And the reason that I could, latch onto that in an emotional way, even though I knew nothing about fishing, is, in my own life growing up, I saw my parents wrestling with these questions about what can we hold on to of our culture and what do we have to let go of in order for our kids to thrive in a new context. So that linked me in a way and gave me a courage to pursue telling a story in this world, even though I was coming at it as an outsider. And now, even if I'd grown up in Malta, I still would have been an outsider to this world. So in some ways, growing up Maltese American gave me a way to relate to it that was helpful.
So how did you enter the fishermen's community? It's so close-knit. I mean, me going to Gozo, we always say, oh, that's a fisherman, oh, he brought the fish, and we see them, we say hello to them. But it seems like they have their own community and their own ways. How, as a Maltese American, did you enter that and gain their trust?
It's a great question, and it was not always a straight line. One, I really did rely on the help of my team in Malta, and I worked very closely with a terrific casting director who works on all the big shows in Malta. As we know, there's a thriving film industry there. So he knows cinema very well. He's a very talented casting director. But he's also a part-time fisherman and loves the sea. And he was an incredible partner in the early stages to get me going and make introductions. And so his name's Edward Side. And, I'm glad to call him a friend at this point. But when we were starting out, it was literally just driving around the island and essentially cold calling people, except instead of calling, we just walk up to them and, try to say hi. And sometimes you'd get shooed away. And sometimes you'd have to meet someone 3 times before you could actually have a conversation. Like you were saying, they're rather close-knit communities, but I mean, fishermen really love their work and it's very demanding. So anything that's going to take them away from it is, they are not always like in the mood to kind of sit down and kind of talk about whatever, if, they've got nets to clean and, the fish is going to spoil if they don't get it to the restaurant in time. So not a straight line, but highly rewarding period of soaking up stories and seeing these amazing faces and just getting embedded in this world, of course, that I really knew so little about before starting.
Yeah, I kind of relate to that. I mean, having a father who was a seaman, not a fisherman, but very close, relationship with the sea and all that. He was also a very quiet man, and getting stories, it had to be the right time. There was no
Yeah.
um, fluff, as I could say. Uh,
Yeah.
which I clearly see in the film. And that is what really touched me. There was no fluff. It was so authentic to me and really captured what I would expect in um, the life of a fisherman. And you really brought that onto the screen. Now, when you chose your actor, who is, you, as they're saying in the film industry, a non-actor, non-professional actor, Jesmark, who is a real life fisherman, when he was finally chosen and he was approached about this, how did he react and how did you get him to agree to it? As you said, they're so busy and, this would take time away from his, profession, and how he would continue that after the film.
Yeah. Um, well, so I should say first that, I always knew that the lead fisherman characters needed to be real fishermen,
Mhm.
not actors. Part of that is practical. It's much easier to teach a fisherman to act than to teach an actor to to fish. The role is so physically demanding, um, and it's very evident if you look at a fisherman who's spent his lifetime on a boat. Um, his body changes, his physicality, his balance. Um, there are these things that an actor, no matter how good they are, they'd never be able to fake, no matter how much training you gave them. And the reason that I wanted to cast non-actors is so part of it was practical, that it would help me achieve this very realistic sense. Um, I was wanting to make a movie that didn't feel like a movie. It really just felt like real life, and a camera just happens to be there. Now, it's not a documentary, it's a fiction film, and there's a script and there's a storyline, but I want it to almost feel just like it's just happening and you happen to be there to witness it. And so working with the real people in the real places gives you that the credibility that this is a real fisherman and he knows what he's doing on the boat and there's no question about it. But then in another sense, it wasn't just practical, it was also something, I don't know, I want to say ethical.
Mhm.
Um, because the Maltese have had so few opportunities to be on screen, what a great opportunity to have the real people play themselves. Um, and if you bring in a non-actor, they're not just standing there and saying the lines, but they're adding something from their own life. They're adding quite a lot, actually. I
Mhm.
mean, their lived experience, and in the case of Jesmark and David, generations of fishermen who've come before them, their communities, all that ends up on screen. Some of it, literally, we film scenes of the fishing community, and some of it is intangible. Some of it is really just like, they're putting their soul out there, and I think it elevates the film beyond being a normal work of fiction. I really do. Because if you cast an actor in the role and they said all the same lines and every shot was the same, I still don't think it's the same film. I think that it becomes bigger with the non-actor because the reality is adding this intangible thing that's sort of breaking through the screen.
So again, back to Jesmark, when he was chosen, did he know there would be a black market element in the storyline? And how did he deal with that? Because, like, again, I said, it's a close knit community. And we all know Malta, well, our general audience know Malta and Gozo is quite small. And if one does one thing, it starts to spread around. And did people in the fishing community know he was doing this film and that there would be this black market element in it, and how was that dealt with?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. I should say first that we had a rather unusual way to work, which was we improvised a lot of the film's dialogue. But we did the improvisations over a period of 2 years before filming.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that we did that was when you work with a non-actor, um, I wanted performances that were very natural and again, feeling like spur of the moment. Uh, I think the worst thing you can do is just put a script in front of them and ask them to read it because, they're not trained to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted Jesmark and David to use as much of their own dialogue, their own dialect as well. That was important. Um, and so we had a lot of time actually together to build up the characters and the story. So Jesmark and David were, I should say, Jesmark is the main character. David is the secondary fisherman character in the film. And in real life, they're cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And they often help each other with fishing. So they're always together. So we had this 2 year period to go through all the scenes in the film. And so they knew exactly what I wanted to do in the story. And they were real allies in doing it correctly because I had maybe some more high concept ideas about how this black market could work. And maybe it was a little bit too much like a movie. But we worked together to make sure that it was realistic, first of all, and not just the black market scenes, but that they really helped me in all aspects of portraying the fishing worlds correctly, authentically, and getting to the emotional truth of what their trade and what their family's tradition was all about. So there was no, so I never wanted to put Jesmark and David into a compromising position about what the storylines we're going to get into. And to be quite frank, the sort of the black market criminal element that we portray in the film, I think to a general audience, it's going to be quite surprising. I think to anyone involved in the fishing industry, it's very mild. I think that the kinds of malfeasance that actually take place in the fishing industry, and not just in Malta, all over the world, really dwarfs anything that we portray in this film. So they were comfortable with it and understood it was a work of fiction and that we're using their biographies only to a certain extent just to kind of get the film on its legs, but then it has to go into a direction where it departs from their own experience. And I really credit Jesmark and David for having that faith in me. And I, they love the film. They're very proud of it, and I think that they feel like it's very, very fair and heartfelt portrayal of their world.
Yeah, I see that what you're saying, it evolved organically, basically, between you and the actors and non-actors to create what we'll see in LUZZU. I'm trying to be very careful not to give anything away since I did see it in Sundance. Did you have an audience in mind for LUZZU? I know it has, Maltese actors, the language with subtitles, filmed on location, not in a set location in Malta. What was the audience you had in mind, or was there no audience in mind and it was just, what you felt in your heart to create?
That's a really great question, and I'm so glad you asked it. There's a piece of conventional advice in filmmaking, which is make the film that you want to see. And on such a fundamental level, this was the film that I always wanted to see. A film not just shot in Malta, but about Malta, and not just making use of the beautiful locations, but the beauty of the culture with the real people using the language and trying to make some sense of the identity of what it is to be this kind of person, to have some skin in the game, to engage with the Maltese identity. If it could be one thing, I don't know that it can, but I think that this film at least takes one aspect of of the Maltese identity, and tries to really explore it in a humane way, giving these characters, each of them, a strong point of view and allowing you to empathize with them. And so I had a faith that that was the kind of film that I wanted to see. And if I wanted to see it, then there must be someone else who would like to see it. And maybe it would have to be another Maltese American, but even so, that's enough. But truly, I had a larger faith that it could expand beyond just people like me and you and maybe some of the people on this call, because, like I was saying, I was in love with world cinema and could watch films far away from my own lived experience, from parts of the world and from times in history of which I've never lived. And it brings me back to a faith in, first of all, the visual medium, because unlike a novel, let's say, I mean, film is fundamentally visual, and it is our cinema really is our shared language. On some level, a film should work without dialogue, and therefore you don't need to speak the language or any language to understand it. But then also, the story was written both to be highly specific but universal at the same time. And we never ever believed that there was a contradiction between those two things. Again, I think that's how the best stories work. In fact, when you make them very small, they become big. They expand inside of each person who watches it, and they become resonant in the viewer in ways that you can never imagine. Take, for instance, we've sold the film, meaning that it will be in cinemas in over a dozen territories around the world, including China, Japan, and Brazil, places very, very far away from Malta. So there, I think that faith somehow in the visual medium, in these universal stories, is already kind of proving itself that this small Maltese film is going to be seen by people, many of whom maybe have never even heard of Malta. So I think that's hopefully encouraging to anyone, in any storytelling tradition.
Yeah. So again, like you said, it's going to places where people probably never heard of Malta, and the film can be received by a much larger audience beyond the Maltese or Maltese American audience. Saying that, as I deal with duality of being Maltese American, many people deal with a duality in everyday life. They don't fit in here, but they feel like they fit here, or they have to give up this in order to get this. And I feel LUZZU has that. We see, Jesmark struggling. He is in Malta. He is Maltese. He's a Maltese fisherman. But his duality that he's dealing with is, sticking with the LUZZU or transitioning into this, darker path, and that's what I see the duality in the film. And as you said, that can reach a wider audience. Do you find that is a correct idea that an audience might feel?
Well, that's great to hear. It's not for me to say right or wrong, but I really love your interpretation. And I have to feel like there's that tension is certainly baked into the character. He's a man at a crossroads, and he's caught between two worlds, so to speak. Tradition and modernity might be one way you could put it. And I think we've all felt that way. I think, again, one of the reasons that the story might be universally resonant is I think all of us come to crossroads in our lives and kind of have to make choices between who we were and who we could be. I certainly felt that way in the making of the film, and kind of having to, reconcile your past and all the good things that led you to be who you are, but also recognizing that tradition and family sometimes, even though it builds you up and gives you a great deal of meaning, it can also be the thing that's holding you back from who you need to be. And that's the problem that is facing Jesmark in this story. He's in love with his tradition and attached to his boat, which has been passed down from father to son for generations. And yet he's coming of age in a time of change. And what he inherited is no longer good enough, and it's tragic. And so he's faced with these choices. And, you know, in the course of the film, we're going to be on the journey with him, and as he tries to figure out if he can change himself and change his family's story in time for his son to have a better future. So yeah, I like how you said it. The contradiction and the tension is so alive in all of us, and that was certainly a central theme that we explore in the film.
Yes. And I also wanted to ask about the other actors. You know, we're focusing on Jesmark, but there is, you know, these other supporting actors in the film. Could you explain, you know, how their supporting roles, you know, enhanced Jesmark's role?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you called them out, because Jesmark is the main character. He's in almost every scene in the film, and we built the story around him. He walked away from Sundance with the acting award, which is incredible. It's his first time on camera, so we're all very proud of him. But it takes, you know, the whole team's got to be good,
Right.
you know, for someone to, for anyone to be awarded, the whole thing has to work. So the other performers, I'm so proud. There's not a bad performance in the film. Everyone really
Right.
brought their best to the film. And it includes a lot of non-actors, but also some traditionally trained actors, of which there's plenty of talent in Malta as well. So I've spoken a little bit about David, who's another fisherman. I found he and Jesmark together, you know, during the casting process, which was an amazing stroke of luck. They're both excellent.
You got a
Uh,
2-for-1.
oh yeah, yeah. And because they're always together, it was really easy to just hang out, and
Right.
there was always, you know, there was so much of their dynamic in real life that's baked into the film, and I would just watch how they had a kind of brotherly bond, and I just loved spending time with them and soaking it up. And then the other, you know, the third main lead is a terrific young actress named Michaela Farrugia, and it was actually one of her very first film roles. She's young; she was 21 when we shot the film, but she's been in theater in Malta since she was a kid, and she's super dedicated to her craft, but just jumped on the opportunity to do something different. And working with like an actress of just great raw talent was really educational for me. And I was really amazed how she changed as a result of working with the non-actors. And I think if you'd ask Michaela, she would say how it was instructive to her, like how subtle the non-actors are. It's not really showy performance, but cinema as a language, like a lot of you don't need a lot of like horsepower. The camera is really sensitive, so Jesmark does things just so subtly, and it was just the right pitch for the film. And Michaela saw that, and she was like, "Oh, that's amazing! Cameras like the camera's a weapon, and let's use it." And so she's awesome, and she adjusted perfectly to what we were doing. And for those who see the film, I think you'll really enjoy it. Anyone who's been to Malta, and even if you haven't, the faces, we just try to cast real people in all these small roles. The people who own the restaurants, the fishermen, these are all real people. Literally, we would grab them off of the street and turn them into an actor in about 20 minutes. And those faces are just, you could never find actors who look like that, you know? And so I'm just in love with all those texture, that real, that authenticity that we put onto the screen. It's really priceless.
Yeah, it was definitely captured, you know, when Jesmark is dealing with the restaurants, and the audience will have to see. I'm being very careful here not to release anything I shouldn't. But yeah, it was just so authentic, and kind of hearing it in Maltese, and I'm reading the subtitles in English. I can understand Maltese, but then there are nuances. You're like, wait, did I get that? But seeing the translation and hearing it in Maltese, there was very, very little difference to me, because the emotions and their way on the screen were enough, even if you didn't know the language. It really captured the activity and vibrancy of what goes on with the fishermen and the restaurants. And Jesmark's quietness also, it's what I would expect from a fisherman, not to be grand in gesture, and, just very, very direct in what he needs to do. I need to get to the point. I need to sell my fish. I need to help my family. I want to hold on to my LUZZU. I mean, it was a driving force in the film for me. And I found, even if you didn't know the language, just visually, it really captured it for me. And there wasn't a lot of things to interfere with that. And I wanted to touch on that. The visual, it was very focused on the subject. You had a LUZZU on the blue, you had Jesmark, and Malta with the limestone background. It's kind of a blank canvas. So it was like a piece of art for me to watch the subject, and then they'd have this canvas behind them, and it really made me focus on them. Could you, kind of explain, was that meant to be, or it was part of how you wanted the story to become visually, or was it just, I mean, there's so many elements. I'm not a filmmaker. I try to understand how that all came together.
Yeah. Well, it's great to hear you responding to, the visual components, because like I was mentioning earlier, film is first and foremost a visual language. So you have to, at the ground level, conceive of the story somehow in visual terms, and have some key elements that will be the visual language. And the LUZZU, of course, is an amazing visual tool, because you have the color, the physicality, and you have those eyes. And that helped us kind of create a bit of a theme of seeing the eyes of the LUZZU. And when you watch the film, this will make more sense. But sometimes the characters are looking at the boat, and sometimes the boat is looking back. And as a filmmaker, you're looking for that special ingredient that could only be in your film, and that no one else could do it. And that's what we had.
Yeah.
Malta can offer you those kinds of things. It is a place of such beautiful visual beauty, which is why it's inspired visual artists for centuries. I think that we have that in our blood and in our bones. The landscape, I think, it's just given it to us. It's been passed down somehow through the centuries, just the grandeur of the physical beauty of the place. I think that's why the visual arts are just strong in Malta. So in some ways, I can't take credit, and I'm not surprised in a way that there is a visual beauty in our film. But to pivot off of something that you said, it's maybe a bit unusual from another film that you might see, because we don't really pull the camera back and do a lot of landscape vistas. We don't really kind of do the postcard views of Malta.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very intentional, because, again, we wanted to get the film away from portraying some kind of idealized sense of Malta, which I feel like is often overused and not really personal. It just feels a bit generic. We didn't want to make it like a postcard from Malta. We wanted to get past that. And the way that we did it was really just take the camera off the tripod, put it on the shoulder, and follow the characters around in space. And in that way, you just get a sense of actually being there. and we really focus on the faces. And often the background is just that, it's the background. And so you might be giving up a little bit of the grandeur of Malta, but I think instead what you're getting is a tremendous intimacy and a feeling like you're there.
Mm-hmm.
And audiences are responding to it because even, I'll hear it's like, oh, I went to Malta, but not as a tourist. I went there like a citizen. And that was the best compliment that I could receive, because it's that level of intimacy I was trying to achieve, because I want you to throw your lot in with these characters, and not to be just looking at Malta as an outsider, but to cast your lots with them and to feel for them and to be empathetic and to be moved, and hopefully at the end of the film you feel like you've been on a journey with these characters.
Yeah, I definitely did feel that. As you said, I wasn't distracted with postcard scenes, and, tourist, shots. I felt immersed with their lives and the localities of where these were filmed. And yes, you feel like you are part of their lives and not part of a, tourist ad or something like that, and getting distracted. Having seen films with Malta in the backdrop, all of a sudden I get distracted. I'm like, oh, that's there and that's that. And this, I knew it was Malta, but I didn't always know exactly where, which was for me good, because I kept focusing on the story, and I was not distracted that it was Malta. I was enveloped in the story of Jesmark, and that was what I saw in the film. So I wanted to also ask, when people see this film, I don't want them to think of it as a documentary. I want them to think of it as a film. I'm familiar with the style of neorealism, which I see in this film. Could you explain to people what neorealism film style is, so they can have an understanding of how this film style is and what it is about?
Sure thing. Well, it's a kind of fancy term in cinema history, but it referred to a movement that arose. Neorealism as a movement arose in the post-war period in Italy from a group of filmmakers, and they kind of charted out a few artistic tenets, and it was extremely innovative at the time, because instead of a very glossy and somehow like artificial style of filmmaking, if you can imagine classic Hollywood in your mind with like bright lights and glossy movie stars and from that era, they were the ones who for the first time said, let's take the camera out of the studio and let's put it on the street, and let's just film simple stories of people going about their everyday lives, and let's cast the real people in the roles, that they would kind of portray versions of themselves. So that innovation gave birth to a kind of a new kind of cinema that was alive in a new way. And like I was describing before, that was the sensibility that I wanted to bring to LUZZU, which is getting past artificiality, getting to some kind of authenticity in which the reality is really just breaking through the screen. And it's just those simple tricks, like shooting on location, casting the real people, and just telling a simple story about people trying to do their best with what they have. And that seemed to be also what Malta needed, because the past sort of filmmaking output for Malta was really, in a way, artificial, in which Malta has been used to stand in for other places, and sometimes even in locally made films, there wouldn't always be Maltese people playing the Maltese characters. So we, try to correct for those things, and it is, like you were saying, not a documentary, but again, is meant to feel alive, almost like a documentary, almost like it's just happening. But I assure you, it it's very meticulously made, and you have to work very hard for it to feel like it's just an accident.
Right. So in making this film, you are the director, you are the writer, and you are the editor, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And were you any other roles in that? This is what's printed, but you know,
You have to, I'm one of the producers as well.
mm,
You have to, on these small films, you have to kind of be ready to do everything or anything. But I don't want to take away from my tremendous collaborators, which, I'm entirely indebted to. Films take a lot of people with expertise that goes beyond me in a big way. But a director's role, by definition, you sort of just have to be a jack of all trades.
mhm,
That matches my personality. I would never be able to really specialize in any one discipline. One, because I like too many things too much. So I like, just that I get to have my finger in all the different pies. But then it is my job to just put all the pieces in the right order at the right level. And I mean, we had a terrific costume designer who happens to be my cousin, and she did a lot of excellent work on the film. But also, a year before that I could hire her, I was like choosing the t-shirts for the guys because I wanted them to wear them for a year before we started filming, So like, I had to do a little bit of costume work, and, was like dyeing the t-shirts in the bathtub here where I am in Malta. Uh, Anyways, on a small film when there's no money, sometimes you have to roll up your sleeves and do all this other stuff.
right. What was the most challenging part of the film? I mean, there are obviously numerous challenges, but is there one challenge that really stuck out for you, and how did you overcome it?
Man, there were a lot of challenges. This film had a hard birth. Part of it was, during the sort of the development period, trying to figure out how we were going to finance it was very difficult because we were operating without a lot of precedent. Essentially, the way that the movie industry works is that no one wants to believe in anything unless they've already seen it.
Mhm.
And so with my producers, Rebecca Anastasi and Oliver Malia, we would go around Europe to various conventions and pitch the film. And it was a hard pitch. People were really excited by the prospect of a Maltese film because no one had ever seen one. And yet, for that same reason, they were reluctant to get behind it.
Right.
That was hard to hear. But, every film's got a challenge like that, especially for a first-time filmmaker. I would say aside from that, the writing is always the hardest part. Um, it's the hardest part to get right. It's the most rewarding when you do. And the script was in flux even until, week 3 of shooting out of
Oh my,
week 5, like out of 5 weeks. So it was a hard birth.
uh, must have been anxiety level to the top there. So again, about LUZZU, where do you hope it will go besides being released in films? What do you want people to keep from LUZZU once it's, you know, done its film releases and, audiences have watched it? What do you want taken away from LUZZU?
Well, I should say that with this film and this kind of filmmaking, you're not necessarily trying to impart a message. You
Mhm.
don't want to limit what the audience will take away. So um, there's no punchline. There's no lesson you're supposed to learn. Hopefully it's just a good story, well told.
Mhm.
But I think that there is an openness in the ending that is intentionally there so that the audience keeps thinking about it after they've left the cinema. And in that way, the film remains alive and remains alive inside of you, and you keep thinking about it. When I think about my favorite movies, they leave me with something.
Mhm.
they color my soul somehow, and I never stop thinking about them. And somehow if films say too much, then you're done with them.
Right.
You leave
Yeah.
them in the cinema and you never think about them again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. But keep
Let
thinking about the film and hopefully tell other people to go and watch it.
let me see if anybody has any questions. I can take any questions if anyone would like to come in. We're live.
Yes, hi Carmen, it's Nikki. I'd
Hi,
like to ask a
Nikki.
question. Hi Alex, first of all, big congratulations. The movie is definitely a big success. Obviously definitely proud because it's obviously Maltese based and all that, being Maltese. I was wondering how you felt when basically you launched the movie at the Sundance Festival virtually online, right in the middle of a pandemic. Like your experience, did you even ever expect to ever launch your probably one of your biggest successes so far, virtually in the middle of a pandemic?
Thanks, Nikki. It's nice to speak finally.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, it was no part of making this film was easy. So the fact that we launched it at Sundance virtually, at that point just seemed like one more hurdle we had to jump over. I missed seeing it with a crowd, definitely. It was going to be another 4 or 5 months before I ever even saw it in a cinema with another person,
Yeah.
which was very strange.
Mm.
But I knew in one way what we were missing, but I missed it less for myself. I missed it more on behalf of my cast, because they had known the fisherman, obviously, and Michaela, the other actress. They had never been to a film festival before. And when Jesmark won his award, they were attending virtually from Malta, and it was nice, and they felt included. But of course, it would have been amazing to be in a theater with 1,000 people when Jesmark wins his award. I miss seeing it through their eyes, in other words.
Mm.
But Sundance was great to us. Now that we've kind of been living in COVID for a while, if you talk to other kind of festivals or kind of people in the film industry, there's a massive amount of respect for what Sundance did. They did the best virtual festival. So I think we were enormously rewarded by the exposure and the care that Sundance took to give to us, despite this awfulness we're all going through.
Yeah.
And it was I think we reached more people, honestly, virtually than we might have in person, just because it was more geographically open. It's hard to travel to Park City in January, and not everyone can afford it, and so forth. So the fact that it was open to new people redounded to our benefit, and I'm not looking back wistfully at all. I mean, we really, we have a lot to thank Sundance for.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I must say the organization was really well done from Sundance, to suddenly catapult into the virtual world and organize the whole opening and festival online. It also impressed me, I must say. It was a smooth way of, purchasing the tickets, the streaming and all of that. So double well done for that, I must say. It must have been hard. I had a few other questions, unless and someone else does. I don't want to just take over.
You could go ahead, Nikki. Go ahead.
Okay, so obviously you're a creative person, Alex, and a great film director. I'm also kind of curious to understand, how basically you went through the dreary months of the pandemic. You've launched the movie, and then suddenly there was this, spell cast upon us. Being a creative and a bit of an artist myself, it's like it was a very hard period for me personally, but I did try to channel my focus and energy through my photography in this case. So I'd like to hear from you as an individual and as a creative person, what did you do in the meantime? Any projects you dived into or thought of or something like that?
Yeah, well, I don't know how you feel, Nikki, but I felt extremely lucky to be in the arts during the pandemic in some way, because I was actually cutting the film throughout the sort of summer of 2020 and into the fall. Well, really the entire year, but when we were all really locked down, I had the film to work on, and it really saved me in a way. It was something I, could just do quietly by myself, and it was kind of like a rallying partner that I had every day. I could just go and sit down and edit. And if I didn't have it, I think those months would have been much harder. So yeah, I feel very lucky to have been an artist. Now, it wasn't all um, it wasn't all good. There were challenges. I would say probably the hardest part was after Sundance, and between then and when we were finally able to kind of start releasing the film this summer and fall, we were still all locked down. Sundance had happened. I attended Sundance from my couch. I had meetings with interesting people who wanted to talk to me. I was still sitting on my couch months later. People had told me that my life had changed, but I was still sitting on my couch. And that was the same for all my collaborators, and we weren't able to share the victory together in person. And I think that actually really was tough. And we didn't perceive, I think, right away that it was kind of sticking in our gears, because as much as it's important as a team to overcome challenges together, you also need to be able to share victories together. And we were kind of deprived of having a really nice moment together and like feeding off of that positive energy. It just was like we were going from one crisis into another crisis into another crisis, and it was hard work. Just this year, all the the premiere was behind us, and it was just like a lot of management, just to get the film ready for all these other events and releases. And so that's something that I've taken away, the importance of sharing victories together. And finally, when I was able to reunite with my team in Europe, we went to the Karlovy Vary Film Festival together, and it was a huge relief. We finally got to watch with an audience and get the feedback that, in the moment, and that meant so much. And, you don't get into it necessarily for people to pat you on the back, but like, we'd been on the road together for almost 4 years at this point, and we were all waiting for that moment just to like be in a room with people and to finally feel like they enjoyed it and we did a good job. And it took just like an extra year and a half for that to happen. So it was a long time coming.
Yeah. Amazing, I must say. Very heartfelt. Thank you so much for answering my question. I must say there's another little project of yours which I really love and admire. It's the one at Unmute. I watched the mini short that you and forgot the name, the artist from Estonia did. I really love it. Probably from a photographic perspective, it really resonated with me a lot. So congrats on that aspect too.
Thank you. Very nice for you to go and check it out. And it was a great honor to be a part of it and to work with a photographer, because what you guys do is amazing. And Tertu is very talented, and I was just feeding off of what she was giving me.
Cool. Nice meeting you, Alex.
Yeah,
Thanks
likewise.
for this interview.
Sure thing.
Okay, thanks, Nikki. Always glad to have you on the show. All right, so wanted to talk about LUZZU's release here in New York. It will be at the Quad Cinema on West 13th Street here in New York City. Will this be the first time a Maltese film is showing theatrically in New York?
I don't know if I could say it empirically. I don't know if Simshar had a theatrical release. They might be the other film to have done it. I'm not sure. But it's certainly our first theatrical release in the US. We've been playing in festivals, which are kind of limited engagements, but now anyone can go and see the film at the Quad Cinema. We open on October 15th, and I'll be there doing a Q&A Friday and Saturday night. So I'd love to see people there. And so we'll open in New York City next weekend, and then the following weekend we'll open in Los Angeles, and maybe we'll do a little bit of communication when that comes around. But it's incredible to be playing in these big cities, and the fact that a little Maltese film is going to be on the big screen. We've got one screen in New York playing. In Los Angeles, I think we'll be in 3 cinemas, which is incredible. And it's a great opportunity that, you know, anyone could walk off the street and watch a good Maltese film. And I feel really good about that.
I do too, being a New Yorker, and, you know, being able to tell my family and friends, hey, check out this Maltese film. It's at a theater. You know, to be able to say it, you know, it to me, it's something, and I'm sure to you, it's, you know, even bigger. And I feel like, you know, I always had to explain Malta, you know, like having a last name that started with an X, had to have, you know, be prepared and explain everything. And so I always researched and knew all my facts. So whatever I told them was true, and it wasn't just, you know, something pulled out of thin air. So to me, your achievement, I share, you know, deep-heartedly. And I don't know if you relate with this growing up in the Midwest. You know, even though New York is big and diverse, a lot of the times people had no idea what Malta was or what it was. I didn't even have it on the map in school. You know, I'd draw a little dot, and, you know, most of the time I was, you know, the only Maltese person. So to me, you know, the film is not only, you know, a great achievement, but for Maltese Americans, it's something, you know, I can identify with, like any other, like I said in the beginning, you know, people like to see something they can identify with on the big screen or visually. And for me, it's because I'm Maltese American.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really matters, and this is becoming more and more true of the films that we watch, and the films that are being made, and why, for me, film is such an enduring language, in that it becomes new again by the storytellers. The stories that are being told and the people who are telling it keep it fresh. That, you know, it is continually interesting because the representation on film is always expanding. And I've benefited from watching films from people whose lives are so much different than mine. And I'm just grateful to be contributing my own very kind of specific slice of the world in my experience, and expanding somehow the map of what's been on film and what's been represented before. And of course, for the Maltese, you know, it is hopefully all the more resonant, you know, because they'll recognize the language and the places and the history and the culture. Yeah, I forgot what your question was, but that's it. Yeah, representation matters, and here we are. We have a Maltese film to watch and hopefully enjoy.
Yes. Yeah, it wasn't really a question. It was kind of me kind of reflecting on my feeling of seeing, you know, something I could identify with. So again, back to LUZZU, it will be opening in the Quad Cinema this Friday and Saturday. If you visit the Quad Cinema website, it will have the full schedule tomorrow, Monday, October 11th. You can order tickets, and they should have a full schedule there. And tickets can be purchased through their website. And I just wanted to say one thing about the film for me. And cannot say too much. I don't want to spoil it, but for me, the lasting image is of the LUZZU. And that's what stuck with me, not because it's, you know, what Malta is, but it represents tradition, and it carries the weight of tradition. And it was very moving for me on what the film is representing. And if you do see the film, you'll know exactly what I mean and what the LUZZU means. I want to thank Alex for joining us today. I do have 2 more questions that I received privately. They want to know if LUZZU will be released in Canada and Australia.
Yeah, great questions. We will be released in Canada. We don't have a date yet, but both in English and French-speaking, the English and French-speaking markets in Canada will get the film. We're still working on Australia. We don't have a distributor there yet, but we're very eager to get it out. We've played at the Melbourne International Film Festival and a couple just small engagements, but we're looking for a wider release, and it's very important to us that we reach especially the Maltese community there. So I'm still pushing, still trying to make it happen.
Well, we're behind you and we support you, Alex, and we'll continue helping you on this journey with LUZZU.
Well, thank you so much, Carmen. It was an amazing chat. Thanks for the great questions. And it's, of course, rare to speak to other Maltese Americans. There's not, in the big picture, that many of us. So it's nice to connect with you over these themes. And I'm so glad to hear the way that the film spoke to you.
Forgot one more question I ask everybody that comes on Il-MALTIN TAGHNA. What's your favorite Maltese food? Only one.
My mom's on this call, so she's hoping that I'm saying something that she cooks. The healthy answer is to say, some fruit. The strawberries,
No.
the strawberries and the melons, I think, are unrivaled. They're very good here. But the unhealthy option is in amaret.
Oh,
yeah.
I love you. Amaret is my favorite.
Can't get enough.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Alex. And again, Quad Cinema will be released with LUZZU October 15th and October 16th. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Il-MALTIN TAGHNA.
Thanks, Carmen. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Ciao.